So putting into our minds an appropriate motivation for doing this action. Remembering that any action we do, as we talked yesterday, and we'll continue to talk like this, so it's crucial, that any action we do is not just the mere action, it's what motivates it. When you think about it, it's really obvious, but we don't often think about it. You cannot judge an action by how it looks. So just because we're looking like we're doing a holy action doesn't follow that it will be a virtuous action in our mind, because who knows what our motivation is. And it doesn't follow if somebody kills somebody that it's a negative action, because we don't know the motivation of the person. As the Tibetans often say, you don't judge anybody because you don't know who they are, you don't know what's in their mind. So let's make this action that we're doing together of listening to Buddha's teachings, thinking about their meaning, talking about it, meditating on it. Let's make it something powerful for our own mind by having a powerful motivation. And the most expansive motivation, the most expansive reason, isn't it, to do something is altruism. There's nothing bigger than that. That encompasses everything else. It encompasses your own wishes and the wishes of others. So thinking, I definitely want to be happy myself. That's definite. I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. And also, commonly what drives us to things like this is we want to understand. We want to know. We want to understand the meaning of things. We want to look freshly at what things are, why things are, who am I, what is the purpose of life, So, listening to Buddha's ideas, thinking intelligently about them, so that I can take some tools away to use in my own life, to develop my qualities and then eventually be of benefit to others. This is my purpose. And thinking all the way to perfection, all the way to benefit others, all the way to the full development of their qualities. So we can express the second two lines of this first prayer, express that. And then those of us who kind of consider ourselves Buddhists already, we can reiterate our reliance upon the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chunyen gi pesonam ki drola penchir sangye drobha shok. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chunyen gi pesonam ki drola penchir sangye drobha shok. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chunyen gi pesonam ki drola penchir sangye drobha shok. Okay. So far really what we've done is look at a few of the things that Buddha says, mainly in the context of this packaging called the Four Noble Truths. But we also touched upon and mentioned, and I'll go to this more now, this other packaging, this Tibetan packaging, this structuring of the Buddha's teachings and practices in this very orderly, step-by-step approach, which is the approach of a course. Everything we learn, as we know, in our ordinary life, we're so familiar with this way. Everything we learn, you learn it, you first grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and so on. It's very simple. It's an obvious and excellent way to learn something. Well, as I said, we don't think of spiritual practice often like this. We kind of lose our common sense and get a bit mystical when we think about spiritual practice and don't think of it in an orderly way. Well, this is what this packaging is. This Atisha, an Indian great master in the 11th century who was invited by the king to Tibet. That's what he did when he got to Tibet, He could see that the Buddhism had been there for several hundred years already. But there was no real kind of intelligent way of practicing it. It was a bit sort of lost, So he wrote this text, Lamp for the Path, which has been used as the basis, really, ever since then, for this for this packaging, for this lamb rim, graded path. And so, as I said, you know, the way they call it, there's the 3 stages of it. The first, you know, and I just simply use this analogy because it's something familiar to our minds: junior school, high school, and so on, because it's so familiar. So this so-called lowest scope of practice, lowest scope of teachings. It just simply means the junior school ones. You know, and what are they? That means that stuff is taught according to the capacity of that level of mind. That's all it is, isn't it? The middle scope of teachings, high school, if you like. The great scope. This is the, you know, so-called university. And then the esoteric teachings, Tantra, this is called. You can call that postgraduate. It's a simple, easy way to think of it like this. Reminds us. So in a simple way, you could say that the first stages of practice are all to do with kind of priming your mind to even want to practice by thinking about certain things. And so the very first thing to start thinking about, Atisha structures the very first part of the first scope based on the teachings of the Buddha on impermanence. Impermanence. So, but he gets us to think in a particular way about impermanence. The teachings of the Buddha are quite extensive on impermanence. They talk about subtle impermanence. They talk about kind of, you know, gross impermanence. And so he gets us in particular to think about impermanence in relation to one's own death. And his agenda here is very specific, is to wake us up, to give us a wake-up call. So that by thinking about death in the way that he structures it, it wakes us up to the fact that life is, that I am impermanent. You can get very intellectual about things being impermanent. Things are. Everything changes all the time. We'll talk about this. But if we really think about I could die at any moment, then it's the wake-up call is, well, I must not waste this precious life. And then he gets us to think on the basis of this, given that I could die at any moment, then we then look at the possibilities of types of rebirth. And so we touched yesterday on the different types of mental experiences, is the best way to call these realms of existence, you know. The levels of mental experience, all the way from enormous bliss to intense suffering, all karmically created, all created by those beings themselves. Not places where you're sent for punishment, which is the usual dualistic way we think. Not like that. And so it's a reasonable thing, Atisha would think, says, that thinking about how life is so fragile and you could die at any moment, and we'll go through it, then you consider, obviously your mind will take another rebirth. Well, then it's reasonable to consider the type of suffering rebirth that you might take in order to get a healthy revulsion for them. It's like you have to think about the consequences of smoking. That's the tool you use to help you stop smoking, isn't it? And so one contemplates the suffering of the lower realms, the next contemplation. And then after this, well, you think, just like we did it, just like we talked about last night, when you think about the consequences to yourself of the negative actions you do, you think, like the poison food, well, you think, obviously, well, whom can I turn to? So this is the next meditation where you would then think about the qualities of the Buddha and taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. Each step leads naturally to the next one, psychologically speaking. And then that culminates in then thinking, okay, what's the option? I must abide by the laws of karma. That's it. So that's the culmination of the first scope. It comes down to that one of karma. That's where you put your money where your mouth is. And so, you know, at this level of practice, here in the first scope, the main concern when you abide by the laws of karma here, the main concern is controlling your body and speech, disciplining your body and speech, controlling your body and speech, controlling your behavior. Why? So simple, so obvious. Because it's our behavior. The body and speech is what interacts with others. And that's what does the harm, isn't it? It's also what does the good. But this very first stage, because our minds are berserk, we're trying to control the very first level of our being, which is our body and speech. Our body and speech. It's our body and speech that harm others. So we try to control the body and speech. We try to behave nicely, just like our grandmothers told us. And it's got a powerful meaning. It's really obvious. But again, we tend not to think this way. It's what harms others. And so the very first thing, the thing that causes us suffering, is the actions with our body and speech that harm others. Okay, indeed, based on our delusions, we deal with this in the second scope when we go to high school. You've got to control your body and speech before you control your mind. It's obvious. So because we're mainly concerned here with not wanting to have future suffering, we're learning to look at the consequences of our actions to ourselves, and we're getting a healthy sense of not wanting suffering. It's learning to have compassion for yourself, really. Then you realize that the actions of killing and lying and stealing and so on and so forth are what leave negative imprints in your mind that will ripen in the future as suffering for you. Of course it harms others, but our concern now isn't compassion for others yet. That comes way later. We have to have compassion for ourselves first. This is an emphasis, and it's one we're not used to taking. We're so used to, if we think of killing, we're so used to just thinking of the person, and then we get guilty, or we think it's right, or all this. We go to the person that we're killing, but that's fine. And as I said yesterday, it's good enough to think that an action of killing, don't kill because it harms others. That's the best thing. Don't go into it if you don't need. But here, we're trying to see the consequences of killing to oneself. And of course, we described yesterday intention, motivation, and so on. But the first thing, Buddha is exhorting us here, not even to look into the motivation. That's really the Mahayana approach. He just says, don't kill. So there's 10. You have a little list, a checklist, a little list of guidelines of how to live your life. Very basic guidelines. And you can see, you learn anything, you always have your guidelines. You don't call it vows, you wouldn't call it this. But they're guidelines. So Buddha's guidelines are this list of 10 non-virtues he says that we should avoid. This is the very first basic level of approach to abiding by the laws of karma. You're not looking into it in any sophisticated way. One can, according to one's ability, but it's just this list, this checklist. So there is, the first 3 are actions of the body that you attempt to refrain from doing. Killing, sexual misconduct, and stealing, isn't it? They're the things we do with our bodies that can harm others. Okay, we also harm others by punching them. There's no vow not to punch, like that, not to harm physically. But the most extreme one is the one called killing. Don't kill. And of course for Buddha that means any living being, because Buddha gives equal status to all living beings from the point of view that they've all got mind, all have Buddha nature, all want to be happy, all don't want to suffer. The second one is don't steal. That's very reasonable. Don't take something that doesn't belong to you. It's clear it causes suffering, isn't it? And then no sexual misconduct. So if we look behind, so we can see how these actions harm others. The sexual misconduct, if you look at it from the simple point of view of sleeping with someone else's partner, it does, it harms others because because it causes so much pain. We can see this. The stealing causes pain to someone when you take their things, and killing certainly, you take their life. My goodness. And if you just check, people don't like having their things taken, don't want their life taken, and don't want to be cheated on. So, of course, we get to the real purpose of the harm, the cause, the thing behind the harm we're doing is to do with the mind. I mean, it's to do with the mind, isn't it? If a person didn't have any attachment to their money, they wouldn't mind if you stole. So you can see how, generally speaking, does cause harm. But, of course, the point we're looking at here is what motivates us. If we analyse the motivation of stealing, of course, it's our own greed, We analyse the motivation for killing. Usually it is aggression, aversion, the wish to harm. Indeed, if it's fishing, it's not that, it's attachment. And what's behind sexual misconduct, obviously, is huge attachment. So there's again, all the time, there's 2 ways of looking. These actions are actions that are done to others because they harm them, which is a good enough reason not to do them. But then we've got to look into them and we analyse why, for our own side, actually why we wouldn't do them. It's because of the motivation you've got, that is why it leaves a negative imprint in your mind. So again, you're not doing them not because Buddha said so. That's not the reason you don't do them. You look into them intelligently and you try to understand it, and to see the logical reason behind it. Of course it's to not harm others, but in terms of karma, here at this point of practice, the main purpose behind it is so as not to leave negative imprints in your mind that would ripen as suffering for you in the future. So it's cultivating this attitude towards yourself of great respect. It's like being aware that you don't want suffering, therefore finding out really carefully what actions you should avoid doing to protect yourself. So then this is forcing you to really to develop that awareness of yourself, which in a kind way. You know, but we even misunderstand these types of instructions. We hear them as some big stick that someone's whacking us with. So we continue to do it with guilt. And that's just being very childish, you know. We've got to grow up. And that means take responsibility, to see the consequences for yourself. And that forces you to take responsibility. And it forces you to see just why you wouldn't want to kill, why you wouldn't want to steal. And then you look into the actions themselves and you see what would motivate me to kill and steal normally, just normally speaking. We can always see there are exceptions, but we're looking at the norm, you know, the usual behavior. And when we look at how they're motivated, then it makes complete sense, because that negative motivation is what causes the action to be negative for you and to leave that negative imprint in the mind, which will then ripen as that type of suffering for you. So it doesn't take too much to think about the consequences of actions if you look at the action itself. So just think about how you'd like to be mangled or killed, how you'd like to be slept around, you know, someone cheat on your partner, how you'd like to be stolen from, and you know immediately you wouldn't like it. Well, good enough. Quickly you can understand, therefore I'd better not steal now, because my being stolen from is the result of my stealing. And that's the crucial thing, that it would seem if we look at the world, we truly lack. We lack a simple understanding, even forget past life, you know, forget continuity of lives, but even in this life, we really don't see that there are consequences to ourselves of the harmful actions we do, not even mentioning the states of mind, you know, which in a way seem even more obvious. So the second group in this 10 are actions of speech, and they list 4 main ones to avoid doing. The first one is to lie. It's fairly obvious. To say words that aren't accurate. And usually you look at your motivation for that, it's totally self-centered, you know, to confuse somebody by saying something that's not true. So you can say all sorts of things are lying, you know. You can say an answer to something that you think is true. You don't mean to lie, but it can really be confusing to somebody. So, I mean, the simple vow here, it's not a vow, sorry, the commitment to make, the commitment in your own life, this little checklist, this guideline to use. You would, the thought is the simple one is to not lie, but then it would also mean we'd really be cautious with our speech. You know, we don't really value speech very much, but if you think of speech, the words we say need to be accurate words. And need to be, not to mention kind, but need to be accurate. And if we look at our speech, we're constantly speculating what we think is true, what we think happened. And I mean, so all the words we're saying might be directly lies, but they're really confusing. So the straightforward lies is the first one to avoid doing. Then there's, you know, bad talking behind, which creates division between people. This is one of the worst ones in relationships, in companies. It destroys from the inside. You talk behind. She did this and she said that. It's so terrible. It causes so much damage. The third one is harsh speech. And you can see this is so prevalent. And it can be so harmful, you know. And the fourth one is they call it idle talk, or what we often just simply call gossip. It just means rabbiting on, you know. Just uncontrollably expressing whatever you're feeling inside because you just feel like you have to talk. No concern whether the person wants to hear it. There's no substance to what you're saying. It's not necessarily bad talk. It's just meaningless. Which doesn't mean you've got to walk around with a long face looking holy all the time and not just having a friendly chat. But it just means controlling the speech. You know, controlling. And I think it's a very strong thing for us in our culture because we don't value our own mind. We don't value our thoughts. We're not trained since we're little children to look into our minds and know what we're thinking and try to control it. So therefore we only think it's valid if we speak it. You'd look at this, you know. The moment we have an experience, you're driving on the car and you see something unusual, already you check, in your mind you're telling your friend, you can't wait to get home to tell them. Because we can't even have an experience and think that's enough. We have to tell somebody. It says something about ourselves, I think, that we don't value ourselves. It's not enough that you've had the thought. You've got to tell someone else. You've got to have them hear it. Then somehow that validates it for you. Or our own experiences. You look at us. Something goes wrong with yourself, an emotional problem. You just have to pour it out onto somebody else. You can't work with it inside. We're like babies, you know. We've got to, as soon as something goes wrong, you run to mummy. Mummy, mummy, Johnny hit me. Oh, darling, it's all right. We have to tell her. We've got to grow up, you know. We don't have to speak every word. We're so used to doing this. And so, of course, we just have uncontrolled speech. It's of no use to anybody else. It's exhausting for us and them. Then you've got, see, they're the main ones. The main ones are the body and speech. But in the, here there are three more, and they're just the sort of the three of the mind, to begin to look at the mind, here, at this level, to begin to control. Oh, some people didn't know it was 9:30. Oops, 9 o'clock. We started early this morning because the Lama here is going to be teaching at 10:30. So we thought we'd get a bit more in for us, but never mind. Hi. No, don't be sorry. We're sorry, we started early. Okay. So the three of the mind, they're just touching on the three main delusions. Ignorance. The three main delusions are ignorance, anger, and attachment. Or ignorance, attachment, and anger. You could divide. There's different. They talk about the 6 root delusions, the 3 root delusions, but here we can talk about these 3 main ones: ignorance, attachment, and anger. And the three in this list of 10 non-virtues to attempt to avoid in order to live according to the laws of karma, the 3 here are just, they're really the grosser expression of these 3. So the gross expression, well, I said ignorance first, but that should be third. It doesn't matter. But the first one is attachment. Well, the gross expression of attachment is what we'd call craving, isn't it? When you just can't, you're continually craving to have this and get that one and get this one, whatever the objects it is, whether it's other bodies, whether it's food, whether it's money, whether it's certain kind of possessions. A really strong expression, craving. I mean, we don't use the word greedy very much anymore, but somehow that, you can see it. It's great suffering for your mind. So the thing here is not to say not be attached, because attachment goes to really subtle levels, but at least avoid the gross level of it. Attempt to control that craving. The second one, anger. The gross expression of this we can see, and it's so harmful in the world, is ill will. This, you can be angry, you can get angry with somebody, but then the person who continues to be angry and then is plotting to harm the person, wants them to suffer, we can see that's what causes the suffering, isn't it? You can see that state of mind. And it makes people insane. You can see, if you can't let it go, and you actually then think about and want to harm the other, really want them to suffer, that's really heavy-duty anger, isn't it? So we're so fortunate if we just get angry and then you can get over it. And let go of it, This ill will is so heavy. Look at the world. The mind, you can see the mind of these terrorists, for years plotting to harm. For years plotting to harm. And then this is what's so shocking, is that it's brought to the level of religion, You think you're doing God's will. That's when it's just so hideous. Because you don't question it. And it's kind of giving you permission to have as much ill will as you like. It's actually thinking it's good. So shocking. And you can see the harm. Unbelievable. And the third one, this ignorance. There's different ways they use this word. It's got usually specific definitions, But there's this root ignorance, they call it. The term in Tibetan for ignorance is ma rigpa. The word rigpa means awareness, and this ma is the negation, ma rigpa. So they talk about the ignorance that's the root delusion. This one I mentioned just briefly yesterday, which we'll go into more, kind of that's known colloquially as ego grasping. This primordial, instinctive grasping at the self. But in general, what Buddha's saying is this ignorance, this root one, it's a grasping at everything as having an inherent nature. We're going to talk about this later, not now. Now that's kind of abstract for our minds. As I said yesterday, we don't even label this as a mental problem in the West because it's so primordial. It's so totally there, and it's the basis, and that's where finally Buddha gets down to. And the removing of this one is finally the job of the wisdom wing, to cut this. This is when we get out of samsara. So, in general terms, though, as a result of that ignorance, we can have a day-to-day kind of level of really gross ignorance, when the mind just plainly is very, very narrow-minded, very stupid, but very ignorant, can also have very fixed views. This is the point. Ignorance, in general, can bring a very... you can see it. Like I said, for example, you know... okay, they use the term here, wrong views. So, for example, thinking that, you know, that group of people are like that. That's a narrow, it's very narrow. You can see it's limiting. People have a very fixed view of what men are like, or what women are like, or what this group of people are like. It's a very, you can see when the person really holds that view strongly, their mind is very narrow. They're not seeing the big picture. You can generalise. We can all generalise about everything. Australians are like this. Americans are like that. You can be general, you know. Australians are easygoing. You can say like that. But to see it, to put it to the level of a concrete fact and then start basing things on that, that's what becomes, you know, what you could call racism, for example. When you have a very fixed view about this group of people. That's, you can see it's very narrow-minded, ignorant mind, very ignorant. It's sort of, you just, in other words, the person's mind is incapable of seeing things from a different perspective. You see things a certain way and you believe it's true. In other words, it's the fundamentalist mind. We use fundamentalism virtually only in the world in terms of religion, you know, we think of fundamentalists. But fundamentalism is a very good term. It's this mind, this very fixed state of mind. This is this and this is that. That's fundamentalism. That's wrong view. Because it's not seeing things from a different perspective. It's not seeing things interdependently. It's not seeing things in a relative way. It's fixed, it's concrete. And you can see that kind of mind is very stubborn, very small, very narrow. Well, that's what they mean here by ignorance. So avoiding the grossest levels of that type of thing. Not being too fixed in your narrow views. Especially, and of course they're talking about in Buddhist terms, not, you know, having the wrong view that there's no such thing as cause and effect, which is virtually how we all think. We don't think there are consequences to ourselves of what we think and say and do. You can look at our behaviour, we can see it. So we need to look at this one, think about it very deeply. Wrong views, they call it. Betty, can you go here? Can you go to my room one? I get my computer to pull the cord out. So what I'm going to do is get, I can't remember all the consequences, but there's a very easy, simple way of laying out the different karmic consequences of some of these actions. Because like I said yesterday, remember, or maybe it was Friday night. No, we've talked about it yesterday too. There are 4 ways in which our karma ripens. One way of dividing karma is in, you know, the first one being the fully ripened result, which is the type of rebirth that your mind goes to after death. The second is, you know, within that rebirth, your personality, your tendencies, your characteristics. That's called actions similar to the cause. The third is all the things that happen to you, and that's called experiences similar to the cause. And the fourth is environmental karma. So again, remembering karma is really Buddha's creation principle. I'm just saying that word very loosely. He's not saying there's someone out there who makes the world and then makes us and puts us into it. He's not equally saying, that, which is the materialist view, that there is merely the material and there are all the physical laws and that determines everything. He's saying these are sort of, he would even say these are 2 kind of extreme views. They're not quite, you know, there's some reality there. but there's not. He would argue with both of those philosophically. He would say, how it is, as we've been talking, is that minds, individual minds, consciousness, not physical, which are continuities that do and say and think things every split second, that process is what he calls karma. The process of thinking something and then doing it with body and speech. This is what runs the show. This is what causes happiness and suffering. This is what even causes universes. So for Buddha, this process of creation is the process of cause and effect. It's not a kind of, it's not like, you know, it's not something you reify. It's not something that is like magic wand creation, a powerful person who invents things. Not like that. It's an evolutionary step-by-step process that based in thought that then produces, that leaves impressions in the mind. Leaves impressions in the mind. And then on the basis of the fact that there is physical matter, there is this relationship between mind and matter. And there is this sort of, as we've discussed, this rough approach to understanding the relationship between our own physical matter and our own minds. So this process of cause and effect, then they're based upon the world of matter. This is the creation principle, how Buddha says. I mean, it seems a bit abstract, and it's not at all what we think, so it takes thinking about. So we're the creators of our own experiences, Buddha says. And so if we, you follow that through, then if we look at our present experiences, you have certain tendencies, things happen to you, and you live in a certain environment. You relate to the external environment, whether it's your own house or the mountain outside. And none of this exists from its own side. None of this is created by a superior being, and none of this is just random. So everything, as Lama Zopa would put it, is our own karmic appearance. Everything that we're experiencing is the result of our past actions. And so we can describe roughly the karmic results of each of these 10 non-virtuous actions. So you can see for the type of karma called fully ripened result, which is the suffering rebirths, that's the same for every action, but it would be variations of it. It would be a lower realm rebirth. And then you can see, obviously, the karmic result called actions similar to the cause. Which is the tendency to keep doing it. It's obvious that the tendency to keep doing, that consequence of lying would be the tendency to keep lying. The consequence of killing is the tendency to keep killing. It would be the same again for everyone. It's evident. You just look at the action and that kind of karma would be the tendency to keep doing it. So the two that are different in each case are the experiences similar to the cause, which is how you experience it from the point of view of other people, and then the environmental result. When Betty brings my computer, we can do it, because I forget them all. Oh, there she is. Thank you. Thanks, sweetie. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh. All right. All right, so the experience similar to the cause, killing, we mentioned this, is that you get killed. Your life is short, your life is cut short, you die young, in other words, or you get sick easily and you have little energy. So you just kind of think about that, you know, killing. It makes sense somehow, you know. You're being killed, you're dying young, your life being cut short, you know. Or being sick. I mean, like sickness is almost like the hastening of death, isn't it? When all the elements don't work and things always go wrong in your body, or you're very weak. These are the karmic results of killing. Kind of makes sense. The environmental result, we mentioned this too. You know, the very things that are out there, this in the environment, that are meant to heal, meant to nourish you, you know, don't. They harm you. So you could say that if you've got a really good, you know, relationship with the environment, in the sense that whatever you eat gives you strength and you don't have to eat much and you stay pretty healthy, you could say that's the result of non-killing. That's the result of consciously refraining from killing, of keeping the vow of non-killing, of the morality of non-killing. So the karma of, you know, and this could be from, who knows, I mean, karma is a really subtle kind of set of laws. It's sort of just like botany. You can say the simple principles of botany. You get a seed, you have the earth, you put the water and the soil. That's good enough to understand it, to try and get along with it. But if you're really a botanist, you'd go into it in very great detail. If you want to go and start, you know, splitting the atoms of vegetables and genetically changing things, you've got to know the science of botany really, really well. You've got to know the enormous intricacies of it, don't you? Well, karma's like that. It's just a law that happens, that occurs. No one invented it. It's just a natural law that Buddha has observed. So it's extremely intricate, highly complex. At the time of death, exactly what karmas ripen when to produce what, you know. So all we do is like very broad strokes, looking at the very rough principles of it. This is the best we can do, and it's good enough to, at the moment anyway, good enough to use as a guideline. You know, without knowing too much about genetics of vegetables, you can grow a very nice garden. So the environmental result of killing is that, you know, the food, the drink, the medicine, the crops, they're kind of weak and they're scarce and always inferior and low in nutritional potency, you know, or hard to digest and cause disease. And then also most beings around, this is an interesting point, that you're living in an environment where lots of people are dying young, you know, a lot of sickness and ill health, dying young. You can see lots of places like this. That's the environmental result of your killing. Okay, they're dying young as a result of their karma, but you're being surrounded by it as a result of yours. You create the cause to get born there, you know. Stealing. The experience similar to the cause of stealing is that you never have enough to live on or make ends meet. And we can see that. Some people who are really rich, always in debt, never have it. That's because they're greedy too, probably spending too much. You know, but no, the experience you have is you never have enough to live on. You never can make ends meet. It just doesn't seem to work, you know. So the other one, though, too, I remember reading in the New Yorker one time a long article about one state, I can't remember, maybe New Orleans, just the plight of poor people. And like so many of these people working 60, 70 hours a week, never having enough, no matter how hard you try, you know. This is the karmic result of stealing. But also, too, very simply, that others steal from you. You know, people don't pay their debts. That's a very common experience. Or that what you do have is all common property with others. Well, that's the experience of prisoners for sure. I think even your underpants you share, you know. Nothing is yours. You have nothing. And one of the commonest experiences we have for our prisoners, you know, we have, over the 10 years, we probably had letters from, I don't know, maybe close to 10,000 people in prison all over this country, not mentioning Australia or other countries now. And every month now we get at least 600 letters, not just from prisoners, from chaplains in prisons, but mostly from prisoners, you know. And the commonest experience among all the ones we've known over the years, they have nothing, can get nothing, have no means to get it. They get 30 cents an hour, whatever. It's just their experience, you know, the karmic experience. And that's the thing too. If you think about being in prison, you think, oh, well, you're in prison because you killed somebody. Well, no, karmically, that's not the reason. Lots of people kill and don't go to prison. Karmically, you see, what you've got to do is look at an experience and you try and think of what the cause of that karmically from the past. Well, what's being in prison? You analyse that. It's not having any freedom, not having any rights, not being respected, being seen as garbage, Having no food, no money, no this, no that, no. So it's a whole lot of things there. You can see it's almost the result of misusing others in the past, you know, taking their freedom away. Arrogance and pride, that causes you now to be seen as nobody, you know. It's interesting. So the environmental result of stealing, it seems a bit like the same as killing. Crops are few and far between, have no power to remove hunger, spoil or never come up. Their dry spells stay on too long, it rains too much. You look at that, you know. Always seem to be extreme. I know in Australia, and I'm sure in a few of the states here too, you know, we have what we call bushfires. When you don't need fire, you know, when you don't need the fire. You have rain when you don't need it. You don't get rain when you do need it. Things never seem to work, you know. You have droughts. The environment just doesn't work properly. Result of stealing, killing, these different things. The third, sexual misconduct. This is interesting. The experience similar to the cause is that the people who you work with and who are around are always unreliable. Unreliable, you know. Your relationships don't last. Every kind of relationship. People give up on you. Your best friend leaves you, you know. Not to mention your other relationships. You find yourself having a lot of competition for your partner, you know. The environmental result is you live in a place where there's kind of, it's really stinky, urine and feces all around and mud and dirt and filth and everything stinks and everywhere seems unpleasant and distasteful. Think about, you know, attachment, very strong sexual attachment. And again, don't hear all these in a moralistic way. Look at the delusion. You know, from having a relationship with somebody, there's also lots of love and pleasure. That's not a problem. We're not discussing the love and the pleasure. We're discussing the delusion. Then your verbal actions. The experience similar to the cause of lying is that, this is so obvious. We all have this experience. No one believes what you say, even when you're telling the truth. This is very interesting. You feel so painful sometimes. You know you're speaking the truth and no one believes you. Well, this is the karmic result from past lives of lying. No one believes your words. And also, obviously, people are always, you know, deceiving you. People deceive you. People lie to you. And we can see that even if you're being honest. It can be an experience very strongly. This is why I'm saying, and I said yesterday, that we can see that there are these two sort of tracks of karma. There's your tendencies, and then there's the stuff that happens to you. And we often link these all the time, and that's why we nearly go crazy. If people lie to us, we don't know why, because we've not done anything wrong. Well, you don't have to have done, not in this life anyway. They're two separate tracks of experiences, what happens to you and then what you do. It can be you can have both. You can have a tendency to lie and have people deceive you. But you can be very truthful and still have people deceive you. Or you can be lying and have people who trust you. Because that's the karma of not lying from the past. But you've got the tendency to lie from the past. They can come together too. You can kill all your life, this life, and live till you're 97. You can not kill and die when you're 5. So these are two tracks of karma. They don't necessarily have a relationship. The environmental result of lying is that your work in cooperation with others always fails to prosper, and people don't work well together. Everyone generally is cheating each other and is afraid, and there are many things to be afraid of. You can think of lots of experiences like that, lots of environments like that, work environments like that, you know. So much paranoia and distrust and going behind and noise disharmonious. That's the environmental result of lying. Divisive talk. You know, talking behind, bad-mouthing. I mean, criticising behind and then splitting people. Experience similar to the cause of this is that you easily lose friends. People around you are always fighting one another, and people around you have undesirable character. It sounds like prison too. Absolutely prison, my goodness. The environmental result, the ground where you live is sort of covered with obstacles like fallen tree trunks and thorns and stones, and you're surrounded by harmful spirits and thieves or muggers and the like. There are plenty of places like that. Divisive talk. This business of wrong, the last three now of the mind, okay? Oh, what happened to my list? Oh, here we are. More of talk, more of speech. Oh no, more here. You know, the environmental result of divisive talk, the ground, and then sharp, broken, it's all rough and ugly and dreary, and there are no streams or lakes or water springs. The earth is parched and poisoned and burning hot and useless and threatening, a place where there are many things to fear. That's the environmental result of divisive talk. You just have to look at the world. You can see experiences like this. It's just that this is a different explanation of why it's like that, isn't it? You see, this doesn't discount the present cause, you know. It's obvious that you've got it's more, of course you can see the present cause of environmental problems. It's obvious. Just go look at Al Gore's movie, you know. You can see that's the cause, that's the condition that occurs now. But why you're born into that, why you're surrounded by that, that's the main discussion here. That's the main discussion here. Of course, why work is so disharmonious is because people badmouth each other. But why there is why you're there and why you're surrounded by that. Okay, you can leave it, that's good, if you can. But sometimes you can see people don't leave their environment. You're so stuck there, you know, you just stay with it. So it's not so much the act, you know, this doesn't discount the other factors, the present things that people do. Do you see the point? Okay, think about it. Idle talk, just this rabbiting on, you know, meaningless, essenceless words. And this is really obvious, this one. The experience similar to the cause. No one listens to you. It's really obvious. So it doesn't mean that in this life you do that. It's, I think this is the karma of women, actually, in the world in general. You know, if you're in a very traditional environment of, you know, you understand what I'm saying, very traditional environment where a woman is just meant to be the woman and you don't talk, and you don't do this and don't say that. Well, if you open your mouth, who's going to listen to you? A bunch of men. Excuse me. I mean, I'm not being rude here because we've all been men countless lives and we've all been women countless lives, so don't get personal about it. It doesn't matter, you know. And the woman of this life is not being respected as the arrogant man of the past life, so we shouldn't get too caught up in all this stuff. But we can look at these experiences very objectively. You understand? And one of the commonest experiences I know in my own life of being a woman, being female, is that your words, maybe it's changing these days, we're different, things change, you know. But the traditional one, isn't it, is that women, that you speak, no one listens to you. Who are you, what do you know, you know? You can look. That's not just being female, obviously. But it's just interesting to see that. No one respects what you say. No one thinks your speech has value. It makes sense. So if you just waste your speech, if you have had the habit in the past of just blah, 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 you know, of course, then what you do say. But even now you can see some people don't talk much. And when they do talk, people all listen. Oh. But a person who talks too much, even now, oh, here she goes again, you know, or here he goes again. Your ears blank off, don't they? So we can see it. Even now it's like that. You can see. Environmental result of idle talk. Fruits don't grow, or they grow at the wrong time, or they seem ripe when they're not, or they've got frail roots and there's no leisure places, like parks and glades and pools of cool water and many things around you. Again, many things around you make you afraid. Harsh speech. The experience similar to the result of harsh speech. You'll always be hearing distressing words. This is prison for sure. One of the things they all say, the noise is unbelievable. And of course, it's not pleasant noise. Like, how are you, my dear? I doubt it. Screaming, violent, angry, distressing sounds. And the environmental result of harsh speech is you'll be born in a desert country. There's just nothing, you know. Harsh speech. So you can see really sort of, you kind of talk a little bit colloquially about it all. You know, the energy of attachment is kind of yucky, you know. Yucky. So, you know, we talked about sexual attachment. Environmental result is sort of dirty, stinky. And then you can look at the ones motivated by anger. It's like fire. It burns everything up, you know. Do you understand? Just speaking colloquially. You can kind of get this. Mental actions. These three main ones, remember, of the mind: craving, ill will, or anger. What happened to anger? I've lost it. Oh, that's it. Craving, ill will, and wrong views, as they call it. Well, craving is a very gross expression of attachment, isn't it? So the experience similar to the cause is your personality is dominated by desire. You are never satisfied with what you have. That's the experience of attachment. So we can see our own minds, you know. We've all got this strongly, but some people deeply strongly, just overwhelmed by craving, overwhelmed by attachment, by desire, never satisfied. So you can think of gross examples. People who've got sexual attachment, people whose main suffering is this. You just have to look at their face and you can see the suffering. It's just appalling. Their mind's overwhelmed by thinking about it day and night. You know, it's like living in an insane asylum in your own head. And the environmental result of attachment, of craving, things just immediately, as soon as you get things, they kind of become old and worn. Because attachment, you look at when you have just objects. You like to have a new little bag or a new computer or a new something. You see it, it's all kind of sharp and nice, you get all excited. You like to look at it, don't you? You like to look at it. You like to use it. This is the way attachment works, isn't it? Just for a little object, a new object. So one of the sufferings here, environmental result of attachment, is that, you know, it's almost like within a minute it's all old and broken. You know, when you're a kid, you have this brand new, beautiful thing, and then it all breaks. The sadness is so much. Remember, I had this little doll's chair. We had 7 kids in our family. We were very poor. We never had many things, you know. And then, of course, because you were all taking each other's things, you didn't have much respect for each other. And I had this little blue doll. I'll never forget this little doll's chair. I couldn't believe it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. This little chair, you know, doll's chair, blue wood. I couldn't get over it. And then it all broke within a day, and then next minute I see that it's been used to prop up a bit of the fence that had broken. I'll never forget seeing my little doll's chair. I'll think of it now even. It was in my mind so strong. It was this sadness, you know. Oh, my little doll's chair. I kept trying to visualise it when it was all whole and nice. Things just don't work anymore. They break, and they're old, they crack, they break. And so many things now, you buy them like this, and they're just practically broken before you even use it, you know. That's the environmental result of attachment. Well, I'm just saying it like that in one way. So now the next one, ill will. This really strong expression of aversion, you know, this one of hankering after harming, wanting to harm somebody, wanting them to suffer. It's obvious. The experience similar to the cause of that is that your personality is dominated by anger. That anger will be your main delusion in this life. Always fighting with people. So distressed. And your mind, that's where paranoia eventually, it leads to paranoia, where you're constantly thinking that other people are harming you, you know, and you really believe it. You know, you always find, so this is, your personality is dominated by anger. You always find yourself without help, or never find the help you need. You're always hurting others or being hurt by others. When you think of that one, you know, you feel like no one loves you and no one's ever there to help you when you need it. That's a very common experience, isn't it? That's the result of anger, ill will, and your own personality dominated by it. And the environmental result is that you live in a world of chaos. Disease is spreading. Evil is everywhere. There's plague, conflict, sickness. You have fear of your country's or others' military. There are dangerous animals. I've lost my page now. Here it is. And you're surrounded by harmful beings, you know. You can think of lots of places in the world like that. I'm sure Iraq's like that right now. It must be like a nightmare for people. Absolute nightmare. Wrong views, this narrow, ignorant mindedness, you know. Your personality is dominated by stupidity. You have a person, you become a person who keeps harmful views, you know, like eye for an eye, very deceitful. Environmental result, you live in the world where I don't quite know what this means. Just where everything is, where things that are kind of things that are really revolting, but people think they're nice, and where suffering things are actually nice. When suffering things are actually nice, you think that, and where there's no place to go and no one to help and nothing to protect you. In other words, you just look at all the world. And look at everywhere you go, every one of these experiences is familiar. And all this is Buddha's explanation of why you're having that experience from the past. You know, why rivers are polluted now is because people do wrong things to it, but why it's your experience. And we can even see this collective experiences now so strong, aren't they? You know? So that's the 10 non-virtuous actions. So maybe Rinpoche is going to come at 10:30 to have a chat to us, talk to us, teach us. So would you like to now ask a few questions about this? If not, it's okay. I can keep talking. Yeah.
Regarding idle speech, if you are in a situation where you're with another person and they want to engage in a
Well, then you're not talking idly, are you? I don't mean, you see, idle speech isn't meaning that you can't talk about ordinary things. It's a question of your motivation. If you're there and a person wants to chat away, and if they just want to chat about rubbish, and just because, then okay, you don't just follow that. You can keep some control, can't you, about what you talk about, or you can be conscious. I mean, okay, there's different things. We just want to chat. So you're there and they're compulsorily talking to you, right? Isn't it? Well, then there is a way for you not to be mean. You try and be kind, but you can also have some, like I'm saying, you can also have some control over it and make it sort of purposeful somehow without sounding all like holy. But you don't have to just sit there and be a victim of it. And if a person's talking about, like if a person's bad-mouthing or a person's doing rubbish, you don't need to engage in it. You can be very skillful and, whoops, got to go, or something. So the main thing is to be as conscious as you can and be aware of what you're doing. And then in that sense also helping another, isn't it? Without being patronising. You try to be in control.
Regarding stealing, you were talking about what, in all of this you're talking about what's the motivation. So if the motivation is, for example, to, if you're hungry and your child is starving and you take food to feed your child, does that incur the same kind of negative karma?
I mean, everything comes down to motivation. The main reason we do something for ourselves is the motivation is attachment. It's not virtue. But you see, if the tendency, it's interesting, if the tendency arises in our mind to steal, say, it's because we have the tendency to steal. So that would be the only option available to us. So therefore we would only think that's our only option. But let's say a person who is, like in the situation you're saying, who is hungry, who is starving, let's say, like you're saying, that person mightn't have a tendency to steal. So they might find another way to do it. So it's even the fact that that's the only option that comes to you indicates that's one of the tendencies. Are you seeing my point here? So if it is a tendency and it does arise, you ought to look twice at it. Because there are always other, I mean, not always, it depends on the situation, of course it does. But often there are other options. So we've got to look at our mind. So again, motivation is the key. Motivation is the key. Someone else? So one more, I want to add something to the purification process that we discussed last night then, relating to karma. We talked about the four opponent powers, remember? The first one being regret. So let's say, so each of those four of the four opponent powers purifies each of those four ways that karma ripens. They all together purify, but they've each got a particular relationship with one of the four ways that karma ripens. So I'll explain, and you'll see it. You'll understand what I'm saying. So regret purifies the experiences similar to the cause. So a very tasty way to use this in your life is, let's say someone is lying to you, and it's distressing, isn't it? If someone or they're being mean about you at work, they're criticising you, it's so painful, isn't it? Because you know you've done nothing wrong. Let's say they're criticising you. It's so painful. You've done nothing wrong. And the only thing we can think to do is try and get them to change, to try to tell them the truth. It's so distressing. But often your hands are tied. What can you do? You can rant and rave about it, but nothing changes. Well then, when you understand the karma, you realise that that is the result of your having done that in the past life, right? So now it's ripening. Now people are bad-mouthing you. So the most tasty, a powerful way to work with that, if you try to work with the view of karma and take it seriously, which really does take time, because it's not the view we have. You've got to really think about it. You've got to really go there and think about it, because it doesn't come naturally in our mind. Because what comes naturally in our mind, just instinctively now, is the view that I'm a victim, that it's happening to me, and there's no reason. Of course, if you began in your mother's womb, I agree with you. There is no reason somebody would come out of the blue to shoot you or rape you or lie about you. You see my point here? It really is. From the materialist point of view, from the materialist philosophical point of view, which says that the totality of you began in your mother's womb. If that is the truth, then I agree with you. There is no logical reason, from your point of view, why someone would lie to you or steal from you. But excuse me, also there is no logical reason why a stranger would be kind to you. There's none, from your point of view. You look at I'm going to go back to the regret thing in a minute, but you look at this, it's a very, very interesting point. We have the question, why do bad things happen to me? It's very painful. Why is this happening? The anguish, September 11, the anguish over that. Why is this happening? And even when we hear, oh, well, the reason why is because the terrorists this, and they did this, and they're this, and they think this, and they do that, that's not enough. It doesn't really, you look at this, it doesn't answer the question, why me? When something happens to you, or even if you think of being an American, why us? You can't really find the reason, the answer to that question, that painful question, why is it happening to me? So it's interesting. Let's say it is a personal thing that happens. Let's say someone steals from you. So then say they find the thief. Well, they'll say, oh, well, why it happened, Robina, is because he's a thief and he's got this habit and he was stolen from when he was a kid and his mummy did this to him and that to him. They give all these reasons which we think about in the world. And then that's explaining why you got stolen from. But it's not really. It's explaining why he stole. It doesn't answer the question, why me, does it? So the fact is, in our usual worldly view, there is no answer to that. There's no answer. But the fact that we have that question, I find is very interesting. Why me? Well, Robina, that rapist is this and this and this and this, and you can see very well why he did it, but it doesn't satisfy you, really. It doesn't tell you why did it happen to you. I find that very interesting. So again, like I'm saying, if the materialist philosophical view is the truth, let's say Buddha's wrong, let's say the Christians are wrong, and the materialists are right, that that's a reality, that you did in the totality of you in fact began in your mother's womb, and you've never met this person in your whole life, then there is no reason, there is no answer to the question, why me? It has to be random. Isn't it? But the same for good things, and that's what I find most fascinating. We never say, why do good things happen? Why me? Why did that person give me money? Why was that person kind to me? We don't agonise over that. We don't have a logical answer why, but we don't care. Just give me more, please. So it's kind of interesting. We do have the question, why me? And it's a good question. And well, Buddha happens to have this answer. It's up to us whether we consider it, you know. Buddha says there are answers to that. There are answers to every single thing that happens to you, and that your actions in the past are the main cause of why they're kind to you now and why they're mean to you now, because the logic applies to both kindness and badness, goodness and badness, you know. But just that we don't care about whether people are kind to us. We don't care whether there's a reason. We just like it, so please give me more. But because we don't like the bad things, we ask the question, why? It's kind of interesting. So Buddha says there are reasons, and it's your past actions. What, sweetheart?
Does that mean that it does seem to mean there are really no innocent victims? So a crime,
Precisely.
so a crime committed against a child is not worse than a crime committed against an adult?
Worse for whom? Worse for whom?
Worse for the person committed the crime.
Depends on the motivation, depends on the karmic connection, depends on many there are many factors. There are many factors that you have to consider to look at the entire thing. But the general principle is the same, you know. I mean, you could say, if I beat a little baby unprovoked, there probably is more anger and more rage in my mind, you know, because the little baby, and they suffer more than if I punch you. So one of the factors to consider when you look at the quality of the action you do is whether or not that's a habit. So let's say punching people is a habit of yours, then that makes it much worse every time you punch. And then the way the being suffers, that adds to the amount of suffering. So probably a little baby might suffer more than a... Do you see my point? So that's just one of the factors. So there are, in general, yes, there are no innocent victims of crimes, of bad things, but there's no innocent victim of good things either. We always forget the good things when it comes to karma. If you hadn't created any virtue in the past, you wouldn't even have one single good thing happen to you. But like right now, we're sitting in here with our reasonable health and reasonable body and got a reasonable life back home and had money in the bank and got a job and got a hubby and got kids, or whatever, a reasonable life, right? We take that for granted. We don't think there are causes, but when things go wrong, you ask why. We never ask why to good things. Well, sometimes we might. And so for the Buddha, the logic is the same. Every single good thing that's happened to you up until now in your life is a result of your hard work, your virtue, your goodness, your kindness, your truth talking, your truth speaking, your generosity, your patience. Every single thing. And you would be stunned by how hard you must have worked for the amount of good things that have happened. And every single bad things that happen are the result of your negative actions. The law is the same. So none of it is random. None of it is random. It's not just, some people just get mega, mega rich, you know. They just, unbelievable dollars just come to them. That's the result of their generosity. Every single cent of that. It's nothing to do with good luck. It's nothing to do with their being good at business. It's their past generosity karma. Is the main cause. The secondary cause of why they're rich is their hard work. Yes, like the main cause of pollution of the environment is our past killing. The secondary cause is the actions we do now. You seeing what I'm saying? So anyway, that's the long answer to your question. But does that answer it? Yeah. Okay. So we've got to stop in 5 minutes because Rinpoche's coming. Except we all stop soon. People are going to start arriving for Rinpoche. We better stop now. Okay, we'll stop now. So we just dedicate. We've been about an hour here, sitting here, hour and a quarter. A few things we've talked about. Seeds have gone in the mind. We delight in that. We dedicate that they ripen as quickly as possible in the development of our own qualities so we can be of benefit to others. And may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Gewa Dinyu Dudag Lama Sangye Drub Gyune Drowa Chi Kyang Malupa Dei Sala Kupashog Jang chob sem chog rinpoche, ma kye pa nam ke gu chig, kye pa nyam pa me pa yang, gong ne gong du pel ba sho.